Hello, and welcome to Sleep Stories World. I'd like to invite you to step into a world of relaxation and tranquility with this bedtime story, designed to help you unwind and de-stress. By engaging in this story, you can embark on a journey that nurtures and soothes your mind, promoting overall well-being through sound, restful sleep. Before we begin, let's prepare your space for rest. Ensure you're somewhere comfortably cool, dark, and quiet. If you need to adjust anything, your curtains, your temperature, your pillows, please do so now. When you're ready, lie down and let yourself settle into your bed. Feel the weight of your body being supported. You may want to cover yourself with a light blanket as your body relaxes. Now, gently close your eyes. There's nothing you need to see anymore tonight. Your only task now is to be here, allowing yourself to receive the gift of rest. Take a deep breath in through your nose and exhale slowly through your mouth. Breathe in deeply, feeling your chest expand. Breathe out, feeling your body sink deeper into your bed. In and out. With each breath, you're signaling to your body that it's safe to rest. Now, imagine being surrounded by a warm, vibrant light. This light is gentle and comforting, carrying with it a deep sense of peace and safety. As you breathe in, let this warm light fill your chest. As you breathe out, imagine it spreading gently through your upper body. Breathe in, and let the light expand through your shoulders, your arms, your back. Breathe out, and feel it filling your stomach, your neck, your head, every space within you glowing softly. If a thought comes by, acknowledge it like watching a leaf float by on a gentle stream, and then let it drift away. There will be time for those thoughts later. Now is for rest. On your next breath in, let the warm light travel downward. Feel it reach your hips, your thighs, your knees. Breathe out, and sense it flowing down to your ankles, to your toes. Every part of you now is surrounded by this gentle, warm glow. You are completely enveloped in comfort and peace. Focus on your breath and the warm light surrounding you. If your mind wanders, simply guide it back, gently, to your breath, to the light. You are safe. You are comfortable. You are exactly where you need to be. As we move into tonight's story, allow yourself to let go even more. Let the words wash over you like a gentle tide. You don't need to follow every detail. Simply receive the story as a gift, a soft companion as you journey toward sleep. And now, let us begin. When Shackleton and his men finally reached civilization in September 1916, they returned to a world transformed by war. The Great War that had been just beginning when they departed had become a vast, grinding conflict that had already claimed millions of lives. The newspapers that had once filled their pages with stories of polar exploration now carried daily casualty lists from the trenches of France and Belgium. The men of the Endurance quickly dispersed to join the war effort. Many enlisted in the British Armed Forces, trading one kind of danger for another. Remarkably, after surviving over 2 years in the Antarctic, several of them would not survive the war. Timothy McCarthy, who had been one of the 6 men in the James Caird, was killed in action in the North Sea in March 1917 when his minesweeper struck a mine. He had survived 800 miles across the Scotia Sea only to perish less than a year later in the waters near his homeland. Shackleton himself tried to contribute to the war effort, but his health had been severely compromised by the Endurance expedition. He was sent on a diplomatic mission to South America to help counter German propaganda, but he longed to return to the ice. The Antarctic had become part of his identity. It was where he felt most purposeful, most alive. Meanwhile, the other half of Shackleton's Imperial Transantarctic expedition, the Ross Sea Party, had suffered its own catastrophic ordeal. These men, led by Aeneas Mackintosh, had sailed to Antarctica on the Aurora with the mission of laying supply depots from the Ross Sea side of the continent for Shackleton's crossing party. They never knew that the Endurance had been crushed and that no crossing would be attempted. The Aurora had been torn from its moorings during a blizzard in May 1915 and blown out to sea, leaving 10 men stranded at Cape Evans with limited supplies. Despite this disaster, the shore party felt obligated to complete their mission. They laid depots across the Ross Ice Shelf, traveling hundreds of miles in some of the same regions where Scott had perished just a few years earlier. 3 men died during this work. Mackintosh and 2 others were lost crossing sea ice in May 1916. The remaining 7 men survived until January 1917, when they were finally rescued, having endured nearly 2 years of isolation, not knowing whether anyone even knew they were there. In total, Shackleton's Imperial Transantarctic expedition cost 3 lives, all from the Ross Sea Party. But it remained extraordinary that all 28 men from the Endurance survived an ordeal that by all logic should have killed them. This achievement became the cornerstone of Shackleton's legacy. Amundsen's life after reaching the South Pole followed a different trajectory. Having conquered the South Pole, he turned his attention to the Arctic and to aviation. He became one of the first explorers to recognize that aircraft would revolutionize polar exploration. In 1926, at the age of 53, Amundsen flew over the North Pole in an airship called the Norge, becoming one of the first people to verifiably reach both poles, though he reached the North Pole by air rather than on foot. 2 years later, in June 1928, Amundsen disappeared while flying a rescue mission. An Italian explorer, Umberto Nobile, had crashed his airship in the Arctic, and despite complex political tensions between the men, they had quarreled after the Norge flight. Amundsen immediately volunteered to help search for survivors. His plane vanished somewhere over the Barents Sea. No trace of Amundsen or his crew was ever found. He was 55 years old. The man who had so carefully calculated every risk, who had planned every detail of his expeditions with such precision, died trying to save someone else. It was a fitting end for someone whose life had been defined by polar exploration. Shackleton never stopped dreaming of the Antarctic. In 1921, he organized one more expedition, the Shackleton expedition, with the goal of circumnavigating Antarctica and exploring its largely unknown coastline. On January 5, 1922, The expedition arrived at South Georgia Island, the same island where Shackleton had staggered out of the mountains 6 years earlier. That night, aboard his ship the Quest, Shackleton suffered a massive heart attack. He was just 4 to 7 years old. He was buried on South Georgia at the request of his wife, Emily, who felt that the island where he had achieved his greatest triumph was where he should rest. His grave overlooks the bay at Grytviken whaling station, with the mountains he crossed rising behind it. The inscription on his headstone is simple, just his name and dates, but nearby, a later memorial quotes the poet Robert Browning. "I hold that a man should strive to the uttermost for his life-set prize." The legacies of Scott, Amundsen, and Shackleton have been debated, analyzed, and reinterpreted for over a century. Each man's story offers different lessons about leadership, preparation, ambition, and human endurance. Scott's reputation has perhaps changed the most over the decades. Immediately after his death, he was lionized in Britain as a tragic hero, a martyr to science and national pride. Statues were erected, streets were named after him, and his journals became bestsellers. The story of Captain Oates walking into the blizzard became a defining example of British courage and self-sacrifice. For decades, Scott was presented as the noble amateur, defeated by bad luck but morally superior to Amundsen. But beginning in the 1970s, historians began to reassess Scott's expedition more critically. Books like Roland Huntford's Scott and Amundsen argued that Scott's expedition was hampered by poor planning, inappropriate equipment choices, and outdated attitudes. The comparison with Amundsen's efficient, well-prepared expedition seemed to highlight Scott's failures rather than his nobility. Some critics suggested that Scott's insistence on man-hauling sledges and his reliance on ponies revealed a stubborn refusal to learn from others or adapt to polar conditions. Yet more recent scholarship has brought more nuance to this assessment. Modern historians note that the summer of 1912 was extraordinarily cold, scientifically verified through ice core samples, and that this factor alone might have made the difference between survival and death. They also point out that Scott's expedition achieved remarkable scientific results, collecting geological specimens, conducting meteorological observations, and even discovering fossils that would later help prove that Antarctica had once been connected to other continents and had supported plant life. The 35 pounds of rock specimens that Scott's dying party refused to abandon included plant fossils from the Beardmore Glacier that contributed significantly to our understanding of Earth's geological history and the theory of continental drift. Amundsen's achievement remains undisputed, the first person to reach the South Pole, with all his men returning safely. His expedition was a masterclass in planning, preparation, and the practical application of indigenous knowledge. His willingness to learn from the Inuit about survival in polar conditions, his use of dogs, his attention to every detail of equipment and supplies, these became textbook examples of how to conduct a successful polar expedition. Yet Amundsen's life was not without controversy. His secret change of plans from the North Pole to the South Pole, done without informing his backers or the Norwegian government, troubled some people. His relationship with his brother and financial backers was strained after the expedition. And despite his extraordinary achievements, Amundsen often seemed restless, never quite satisfied, always planning the next expedition. His disappearance in 1928 while attempting to rescue a rival showed both his courage and perhaps his need to remain engaged with the polar regions that had defined his life. Shackleton's reputation has, if anything, grown stronger over time. While he never reached the South Pole and never completed his transantarctic crossing, his leadership during the Endurance expedition has become legendary. Business schools teach case studies about his decision-making. Leadership seminars analyze how he maintained morale during seemingly hopeless situations. Psychologists study how he selected crew members and managed group dynamics during extreme stress. What made Shackleton's leadership so effective? He had an extraordinary ability to read people, to know when someone needed encouragement and when they needed firm direction. He led by example, taking the worst watches, sharing the hardest work, and never asking his men to do anything he wouldn't do himself. During the boat journey to South Georgia, when Shackleton saw that the men were nearing complete despair, he would quietly pour a small amount of warm milk into their cups, even though it meant reducing already minimal rations. Small gestures of care and attention helped men feel valued even in the worst conditions. Shackleton also understood that hope was as important as food. On Elephant Island, Frank Wild, following Shackleton's leadership philosophy, would roll up his sleeping bag every morning and announce, "Get your things ready, boys, the boss may come today." He did this every single day for over 4 months, maintaining the expectation of rescue even when it seemed impossible. The scientific contributions of these expeditions extended far beyond the immediate results. The data collected, meteorological observations, geological specimens, magnetic readings, observations of wildlife and ocean currents, formed the foundation for decades of Antarctic research. The fossils found by Scott's party helped prove that Antarctica had once been part of the supercontinent Gondwana, connected to South America, Africa, India, and Australia. The penguin eggs collected by Edward Wilson and others helped scientists understand avian evolution. The expeditions also revealed how little humans knew about survival in extreme cold. The understanding of nutrition, hypothermia, frostbite, and the psychological effects of isolation all advanced significantly through the experiences, and sometimes the tragic deaths, of these early explorers. Modern Antarctic expeditions benefit from knowledge literally purchased with the lives of men like Scott, Oates, Wilson, and Bowers. Perhaps most importantly, these expeditions expanded human understanding of what is possible. Before Scott, Amundsen, and Shackleton, the Antarctic was a blank space on maps, a frozen mystery at the bottom of the world. After them, it was a place where humans had stood, had studied, had suffered and triumphed. The psychological barrier had been broken. If these places could be reached, if these conditions could be survived, then perhaps no place on Earth was truly beyond human capability. Today, Antarctica is protected by international treaty. The Antarctic Treaty of 1959, signed by 12 nations and now endorsed by over 50 countries, designates Antarctica as a scientific preserve. No nation owns it. Military activity is prohibited. Mining and mineral extraction are banned. Scientific research is shared openly between nations. It is, in many ways, the only continent that belongs to all of humanity, a frozen library where scientists from around the world work together to understand Earth's climate, its history, and its future. Modern research stations now sit in places where Scott, Amundsen, and Shackleton struggled to survive. The South Pole itself is home to the Amundsen-Scott Research Station, named for both the first and second men to reach it, acknowledging that both achievement and sacrifice deserve remembrance. Scientists live and work in comfort unimaginable to the early explorers, yet they still study some of the same questions that motivated those first expeditions. How does Earth's climate work? How do ecosystems survive in extreme conditions? What can Antarctica tell us about our planet's past and future? The huts built by Scott and Shackleton still stand, preserved by the cold, dry Antarctic air. They remain almost exactly as they were left over a century ago. Supplies on shelves, equipment on tables, even clothing hanging on hooks. They are time capsules, protecting the memory of an age when exploration meant stepping into the unknown with no guarantee of return, when communication with the outside world might be impossible for years, when survival depended entirely on planning, courage, and the bonds between companions. As you drift toward sleep tonight, let these stories settle gently in your mind. Stories of human beings facing impossible challenges, of leaders making life and death decisions in circumstances none of us will ever face, of ordinary men doing extraordinary things simply because they had committed to one another and to a purpose larger than themselves. Think of Amundsen and his men, skiing beside their dogs across the polar plateau, moving with efficient precision toward a goal they would reach and return from safely. Think of Scott and his companions, hauling their sledges step by step, collecting fossils even as they were dying, leaving letters that would tell their story to the world. Think of Shackleton standing in that rescue boat, counting the figures on Elephant Island's beach. 22 men all accounted for, all saved. These men traveled to the ends of the earth and, in doing so, revealed something essential about human nature. Our capacity for endurance, our need for purpose, our ability to find meaning in struggle, and our deep, fundamental need for one another. The ice still waits there at the bottom of the world, white and vast and patient, holding the stories of these expeditions and countless others in its frozen memory. And perhaps that is enough, to know that these journeys happened, that these men lived and struggled and achieved and sometimes died in the service of discovery and knowledge. Sleep well, knowing that the world is vast and full of stories, and that human courage and determination have carried us to every corner of it, even to places where the sun circles the horizon and the ice stretches endlessly in all directions, and where the only sound is the wind and the beating of your own brave heart.